Welcome to Ghostly Gazette, where the ordinary meets the eerie. In this video, we dive into 5 spine-chilling true stories that will make your skin crawl and your heart race. Are you ready to uncover the secrets that lurk in the shadows? I like to hike really deep into the woods in New Jersey. There's something soothing about being surrounded by nature, away from the noise and chaos of everyday life. Sometimes I go on narrow deer trails that twist and turn through the thick forest, leading me to places few people ever see. On one of these solitary hikes, I stumbled upon something that still haunts me to this day. It was a crisp autumn morning, and the air was cool and refreshing. I had been hiking for hours, weaving through dense underbrush and following the faint paths left by deer. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. No sounds of distant highways or chattering people, just the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird. It was perfect. As I ventured further, I noticed the ground starting to dip slightly, and the trail grew narrower. I had to duck under low-hanging branches and step over tangled roots. Suddenly, I emerged into a small clearing, and that's when I saw it, a 6-foot deep hole, about 2 feet wide and 5 feet long. It was freshly dug, the dirt piled neatly beside it. My first thought was that it was an animal trap, but there were no signs of any mechanisms or bait. I looked around, half expecting to find someone nearby, but the woods were silent. There was no shovel, no tools, nothing that suggested recent activity. The hole was just there. A sense of unease began to creep over me, but I shook it off and decided to continue my hike. After all, this was New Jersey, and strange things happen all the time, right? Later that evening, I met up with a friend who's lived in New Jersey his entire life. As we chatted over beers, I mentioned the odd hole I had found in the woods. His face grew serious, and he leaned in closer. "You know what that could be, right?" he asked. I shook my head, genuinely puzzled. "That's a mafia grave," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The wise guys dig the hole first and then bring the body later. Otherwise, they risk getting caught with a body in the trunk while they're out there digging." I felt a chill run down my spine. Suddenly, the image of that lonely hole in the woods took on a sinister meaning. I had stumbled upon a grave intended for someone who had crossed the wrong people. The mafia wasn't just a story you heard about in movies, it was real, and it was right here in the woods I loved so much. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hole and imagined the lifeless body that might soon fill it. I thought about the mafia members stealthily returning under the cover of darkness, dumping their grim cargo and covering it up, leaving no trace behind. From that day forward, my hikes were never the same. The woods that once felt like a sanctuary now seemed to hide unseen dangers. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig set my heart racing, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder. I couldn't escape the feeling that I had seen something I wasn't meant to see, and that the shadows were watching me, waiting for the right moment. I still hike, but I stick to well-trodden paths now, avoiding the deeper, darker parts of the woods. When my sister and I were teenagers, we desperately wanted a Ouija board. We thought it would be fun, a way to pass the time and maybe, just maybe, communicate with spirits. Our mom was open to the idea, seeing it as harmless entertainment. One evening, as we all sat around the dinner table, she casually mentioned it to my dad. The reaction was immediate and intense. My dad, who was usually calm and composed, suddenly flipped out. His face turned pale, and his eyes widened with a mix of fear and anger. "No way, absolutely not. One of those things is never coming in his house," he said, his voice shaking. My sister and I were stunned into silence. Our mom, never having seen him so upset, tried to understand. "What's the issue?" she asked gently, hoping to calm him down. He refused to say anything more, shutting down the conversation abruptly. The tension lingered in the air, a thick, palpable silence that none of us dared to break. My sister and I exchanged puzzled glances, wondering what could have possibly triggered such a strong reaction. For weeks, the incident gnawed at us. Our dad was uncharacteristically tight-lipped, and the atmosphere at home remained strained. The mystery of his outburst became an unspoken elephant in the room, a puzzle we couldn't piece together. Then, one quiet evening, my dad finally opened up to my mom. He waited until my sister and I were out of earshot, but curiosity got the better of me, and I listened from the top of the stairs. When I was younger, he began, his voice low and haunted. I had a friend whose older sister and her boyfriend used one of those boards. They were just kids, fooling around with it. The boyfriend asked if he would be rich, typical questions. The board said, yes. They laughed it off, not thinking much of it. He paused, and I could hear the heaviness in his breath. 2 years later, that guy was in a horrific car accident. It was bad, really bad. He ended up paralyzed from the neck down. The accident was because of an issue with the car, and the family successfully sued the manufacturer. He was awarded millions. So he was rich, just like the board said, but he was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. There was a long silence. I could almost hear my mom processing the story, the weight of it sinking in. When we all heard about it, my dad continued. We couldn't help but think about that encounter with the board. It was like, it predicted his future, but in the most twisted way possible. The story sent chills down my spine. The idea that a seemingly innocent game could hold such dark power was terrifying. I retreated to my room, the eerie tale echoing in my mind. From that day on, the Ouija board was never mentioned again in our house. My sister and I no longer desired it, the allure replaced by a deep-seated fear. We realized that some things are better left unknown, that the boundaries between our world and the supernatural might be thinner than we imagined. Years later, I still think about that story, about the boyfriend who asked to be rich and paid a price far greater than he could have ever anticipated. I grew up in an older home in Florida. I have 2 brothers, and since I was the only girl, I got to have my own room on the 2nd floor, a room that I would end up fearing at night. We lived in this house until we moved when I was 17. I don't remember anything strange happening until I was around 15 to 16. Just the normal mom asking us kids where we put a glass or a book. Small things that none of us touched. In hindsight, that was probably either the man or the boy. I came home late one night from a football game at my high school. It was around 10 or 11. My younger brother had a friend over, and they liked to play pranks on me. When I poked my head in to say hello, I made sure I asked if they wouldn't mess with me that night, since I had to get up early for a soccer game. They both agreed and wished me a good night. The way my room was set up at the time was, there was the actual main part of the room, had my TV, dresser, a couch and coffee table that I would use for my friends staying over or when I was reading. My bed was in a little alcove that used to be a small porch so that my bed was flush with the windows that looked to the backyard. I put my bag on the couch and walked over to the bed to go to sleep. It was the middle of the night when someone knocking on the wooden bed frame woke me up. I thought it was my brother and his friend who were just going to be annoying and run out of the room giggling. I flipped over to yell at them but didn't see my brother. There was a boy about the age of 12 with sandy brown hair that hung to his chin wearing a purple hoodie just smiling at me like a kid who got caught doing something he shouldn't have been. And I could see right through him to the rest of the room. I watched as he slowly faded away, completely terrified until he was gone. I slept on the couch that night with the TV going in the background, and I moved my bed to the center of the room after that. The next morning I had almost talked myself out of it, thinking it was a dream or had really been the boys. I asked them the next morning if they had knocked on my bed, but both were sound asleep. My mom had overheard me and said she had seen the boy too. Since that night we started to notice more strange things, but I am positive it wasn't the boy. There was a mean man that I could feel at night in my room. We would hear footsteps walking around upstairs. When all of us were in the kitchen, books would fly from the shelves and glasses would be pulled down and break. Our dogs would stand at the bottom of the stairs that led to the second floor and just growl. One of the most eerie things was the smell of cigarette smoke in the downstairs hallway. No one in our family smoked inside, ever. One of the last things that happened before we moved was my brother waking up to see a tall, dark figure standing over me while I was sleeping. The entire family at that point had seen or experienced something. The boy was just a kid who wanted to be known. The man was something else. None of us were sad to drive away from that house for the last time. A couple of weeks ago, a few friends and I decided to take our kids on a walk down a familiar route that passed by some train tracks near my house. It was a crisp, clear afternoon, and the kids were laughing and playing as we strolled along, chatting about everyday life. As we approached the train tracks, we heard the distant rumble of a train. We quickly gathered the children and hurried across, narrowly avoiding an accident as the train sped by. The incident gave us all a good scare, but we put it behind us and continued our walk, the excitement quickly fading into the background of our busy lives. A few weeks later, I found myself walking along the same route alone, enjoying the peace and quiet of the early evening. The sky was beginning to darken, casting long shadows across the path. As I neared the train tracks, I decided to send a few voice memos to the same group of friends, updating them on plans for the weekend and sharing a funny story about my day. I spoke into my phone, my voice echoing slightly in the stillness around me. Just as I was about to cross the tracks, the familiar sound of an approaching train reached my ears. I paused, waiting for it to pass, the rumble growing louder with each passing second. The train's whistle blew, a deafening sound that filled the air. I finished my memo mentioning the train's loud noise, and then continued on my way. Later that evening, I decided to listen back to the voice memos, curious to see if my voice was even audible amidst the train's thunderous approach. As I played the recording, I heard my own voice chatting away, the rumble of the train growing in the background. But then, just before the train's whistle blew, I clearly heard the voice of a boy shouting a warning, "Watch out." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. There had been nobody on the street with me at the time. I replayed the memo several times, each time the boy's voice unmistakable. It was a clear, urgent shout, cutting through the noise of the train with a chilling clarity. I racked my brain, trying to remember if there had been anyone nearby, but I was certain I had been alone. A sense of unease settled over me as I considered the possibility of what I had heard. Who was that boy? How could his voice have been captured in my memo when I had seen no one around? The more I thought about it, the more unsettling it became. I recalled the near miss we had experienced a few weeks earlier, the train barreling down on us as we hurried across the tracks. Could there be a connection? The next day, I shared the recording with my friends, their reactions mirroring my own disbelief and confusion. We speculated about the possibility of a ghostly warning, a lingering spirit trying to protect us from harm. The story of the mysterious voice quickly became a topic of fascination and fear among us, adding a new layer of mystery to our familiar walk. I really loved playing with Mega Bloks as a kid. There was something incredibly satisfying about building tall, colorful towers only to smash them down with a single, triumphant swipe. One sunny afternoon, after I had constructed and demolished my latest masterpiece, boredom began to creep in. I decided it was time for a change of scenery, so I trotted over to the kitchen to ask my mom if I could go play outside. She smiled down at me and said, "You can, but first you need to go put away those blocks you left all over your bedroom floor." I sighed but agreed. I turned back towards my room, already feeling the warm sunshine calling to me from outside. However, as I reached the doorway of my room, I paused. There, crouched on the floor, was my younger brother, diligently picking up my scattered Mega Bloks. The room was bathed in light, and he seemed very focused on the task, his little hands methodically gathering the pieces into a pile. Surprised and a bit relieved, I ran back to the kitchen and told my mom, "It's okay, Mom. My brother is picking up the blocks for me." She stopped what she was doing and looked at me, then glanced out the nearby open door, where I could hear the sounds of children playing. "Your brother is outside playing," she said, her voice tinged with confusion. I blinked, my heart starting to race. "But I just saw him in my room," I insisted. My mom shook her head, concern flashing across her face. "Go check again," she suggested gently. I hurried back to my room, my mind whirling. When I reached the door this time, I found the room dark and empty. The light was off, and the blocks were still scattered all over the floor, exactly where I had left them. I felt a chill run down my spine. The air seemed heavier, the room eerily quiet. I called out softly, "Hello?" But there was no response, just the faint echo of my own voice. I stood there, puzzled and a little scared, staring at the spot where I had seen my brother just moments before. Who or what had I seen picking up my blocks? Gathering my courage, I quickly picked up the blocks myself, all the while glancing nervously around the room. As soon as the task was done, I bolted outside, the incident lingering in the back of my mind. For days after, I couldn't shake the memory of that strange encounter. I would catch myself glancing into my room, half expecting to see that figure again. I never did, but the mystery of that day stayed with me. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the unknown. If you enjoyed these bone-chilling tales, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Share your own spooky experiences in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and beware of the shadows.